With all of Klal Yisrael, we mourn the passing of the three Israeli teens, Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Dvorah, Gilad Michael ben Bat Galim, and Ayel ben Iris Teshurah. We with all of Klal Yisrael have been praying for them over these last few weeks, and as we learned in Masechet Taanit, sometimes the prayers are not answered, and there comes a point where sometimes the period of praying has to transition into a period of mourning and accepting the loss, accepting the tragedy. So we all going to be there. Was last night. There was, of course, a gathering, prayer vigil, a memorial vigil, and in Midtown, and just. We'll continue to find opportunities together with Klal Yisrael to mourn their passing and to wish nechama for their families and for all of Israel. At the end of our daf, we'll say a kel maleh in their memory. So we resume now on Yoter Amud Bet with Tanya. I'm Rabbi Linzer ben Prata. Yom Shechar Beit Hamikdash. The line starts with the word Hamikdash. It's about 20 lines down in the wide lines. Yom Shechar Beit Hamikdash Nasu Geshamim Tzimukim. From the time that the Beit Hamikdash was destroyed, rains have become raisins. No, the rains have become shriveled up. We don't have the rains the way they used to be when there was a Beit Hamikdash. La'olam Tzimukim la'olam. Yeshana Shegeshuma. So it's always, less than it used to be. True, there are years in which the rains are many, plentiful, years in which the rains are scarce. There's times which, as we learned earlier, it's not just about how much rain, it's about the timing of the rain. There are times when the years rain in the right time. Times it doesn't come in the right time. When it comes to the right times, what is that year like? A slave that the master gave him his sustenance, the flour that he'll need to, or the raw materials he'll need of the food that he'll need for the week on Sunday. So the bread is baked in its right time, and it's eaten its right time. You have all the stuff, and you can prepare, and you can do things and give things the time that they need. When the rains do not come at the right time, what is that? Similar to the Erev Shabbat, that you have your food, you're given all your food at the last minute on Erev Shabbat. The bread is not baked in the right time. You don't have the time to do it properly. And it's eaten not in the right time. Again, it's a little bit funny what the need is for the mashal. You would think that people would understand, transparently what the problem is when the rains don't come at the right time. But probably the power is not in making you understand the practical implications of not having rain in the right time and how it will affect the crops, but it's again to resurface that image of the Eved and the Rav, which in a way goes back to the very first Mishnah, right? Which is when it rains on Sukkot, it's a Siman Klala, and the Siman Klala of it raining on Sukkot is that famous Mishnah in Sukkot, which is when it rains, it's like what? It's like the servant comes to serve water to the master, and the master spills it on the servant. So again, the whole idea of rain is God communicating with us and is evoking this relationship where the servants, God is the master. What do we read in to this? So presumably, again, the purpose of this metaphor is not like, oh, look, things will be difficult if it rains at the wrong time. But no, thinking about this in terms of our relationship and our dynamics with God. To me, seems to be the point of making this metaphor. Okay, and then it goes on and says, we just did it? Okay. If there's a lot of rain, what's it similar to? So the master got his gave the servant his sustenance all at one time. So meaning not just day by day, presumably, although it's a little bit funny because we just spoke about getting it on Sunday, presumably for the week.
So Rashi here says it means you got the whole years all at one time. So you have you got a lot of stuff. So it's not just enough time to plan. For that you need a week. So what's the implications of having all of this well in advance? So Nimsu Rechaim Tochenes. Okay, yeah, Rechaim Tochenes Mina Kor Masha Tochenes Mina Kav. Nimsus Isa Ocheles Mina Kor Kemo Ocheles Mina Kav. So what you get is you get the economy of scale. That now, when you are going to grind it in the millstone, the amount of waste that comes out of a core, which is a huge amount, right, is only equivalent to the normal amount of waste that comes when you do a kav, which is a small amount. Okay, so the amount of waste is going to be the same, presumably. I don't know why it's not proportional, but presumably there is this, economy of scale. So if you're doing a lot at a time, then it's the same amount of food that goes to waste, but it's a very tiny percentage. And similarly, that when you make the flour into dough, the amount that gets wasted from a whole core's worth of dough is equivalent only to the tiny amount that gets wasted when it's a kav. So the same objective amount is going to be wasted, but when you do a larger scale, obviously then the implications are, is much more efficiency.
It's not beneficial.
What?
So this is not beneficial.
Then when it's a lot of rain, yeah.
Late?
No. First we did the comparison early versus late, and now we're doing the comparison a lot versus a little. Right, so they're the two things. Okay, so early versus late is you have enough time and you do things in enough time. Others you're rushed. A lot is you have the economy of scale. Again, which is like bizarre. Isn't a lot just better? I mean, until it's too much. What's the whole point of the metaphor? But maybe the idea is that there are hidden benefits of a lot of rain that you otherwise, maybe wouldn't have appreciated.
Is it a lot or is it concentration? You're getting your entire year's.
Yes, so that's true. That's the problem with the metaphor, meaning that the case is a year shegishameha merubim as opposed to year shegishameha matim, which basically is not concentration; it's just absolute quantity. But the metaphor is, are you getting it like the whole year's worth at once or spread over time? So that's what I said. I don't exactly get why the metaphor is necessary, and it doesn't even exactly parallel. But again, maybe the only point is sometimes there are these economies of scale, these other hidden benefits you don't realize. What?
There's a note in Rashi that says when a large amount falls at one time, more water reaches the productive soil than when the amount of rain is spread over.
Right. So that explains the economy of scale. There's always going to be a certain amount that's absorbed in the ground before it becomes productive. So if you get a lot, then the amount that needs to get absorbed is a tiny proportional to the amount that actually pierces through and is able to be as helpful. So thank you. That's helpful. So there is the similar type of economy. There's a similar type of a benefit that the amount that goes to waste is proportionally a smaller amount. In that case. Okay. Okay, what are we? Nimsas, okay. בזמן שנה שגשמי מועטים למה הוא דומה, לעבד שנעשה לרבה פרנסתו מעט. You only get it bit by bit. Okay, and again here the comparison is not exact because this seems to be the same amount but spread over time. So now it's the opposite. Just the same. I mean, it's the exact same point, but it's like, the same amount of waste that would come from a huge amount is now coming from a small amount, and the same amount of waste in making the dough that would come from a huge amount is now coming from a small amount, which means the amount of waste is always an absolute, amount, but now the proportions are much more against you because you do not have the economy of scale. And somehow, as was pointed out, right, Rashi says that when it rains a lot, there's a certain amount that is not going to be beneficial, and therefore it is a much smaller proportion when there is a lot of rain. Okay, davar acher. B'zman shekishamei merubim l'ma'u domeh l'adam shemegabel tatit. A person that is like making plaster. Im yesh lo mayim rabim. If there's a lot of water to add to the mix as he's making the plaster, so mayim einam kalim v'atit megubal yafeh. The water doesn't run out, and the plaster gets made very well. Im yesh lo mayim mu'atim. If he only has a very scarce amount of water, mayim kalim v'atit eino mitzkabel. Then you run out of the water, and the plaster does not get made well. Again, very funny. What is the need exactly to give this metaphor? And I can't even say what I said before about the Eved and the Rav, because here there's no Eved and Rav. So, anyway, Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, new breakdown. Palachat alu kol Yisrael regel Yerushalayim. One time, all of the Jewish people came on the regel to Jerusalem. Almost sounds like it's quoting last week's parsha, right? They didn't have water to drink. Halach Nakdimon ben Gurion. So Nakdimon ben Gurion went Etel Adon Echad, to a certain wealthy person, not clear, Jewish or not Jewish. Amar lo, he said to me, we'll see later in the story if he comes any clearer. Amar lo, Haveni Shtei Mesrei Mayim Le'olei Regalim. Lend me 12 springs of water, 12 wells of water for those that are coming up for the regalim. Exactly how do you lend the wells? Let us use the wells. Okay. And I will pay you back. Not exactly good. Doesn't mean I'll pay you back all the water that they drank. I'll give you back what I took. Then it's no benefit. Then why would I lend it to you? But okay, maybe I'll give you other ones in addition to these ones. Let's say for now it means I'll give you back the water that they drank. And if I don't pay you back the water that they drank, I will give you 12 talents of silver, an enormous amount of money. Huge amount of money. Yeah, huge amount of money. It sounds also a little bit like, what do you call it? A Merchant of Venice, right? If I don't know, okay. People don't see the comparison. What?
This is a classic.
That was flesh. I do understand that it's like a huge consequence. Well, we'll see what will happen. Okay, a huge consequence if you don't make it by the right time. Maybe that was a weird comparison. The Kolozman, and he said it this time. Kivan Shigia Hazman, the Lo Yardu Geshamim. So the time came and it had not yet rained. Okay, it was time to pay back. He had thought that by this time it would already rain, and he would give them back the wells, and it would have rained. They would have refilled with water. Now he's giving them back the wells, and they're still mostly empty. Of course, the Rashi raises the question that if they're ma'ayanot, don't they refill from underground sources? Not exactly clear.
There might be cisterns.
Could be, but it says ma'ayanot.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Below yardu geshamim. B'shachris shalach lo. And in the morning he sent him, Shagar li o mayim o ma'ot. Send me either the water or the money you owe me. Sheish li biyadcha, that I have in your hands, meaning that you owe me. Shalach lo adayin yesh li zman kol yom kula. Wait, there's still time. Kol yom kula shali, I've got the rest of the day. But Tzarayim shalach lo, in the afternoon he sent him, Shagar li o mayim o ma'ot. Send me either the water or the money. Sheish li biyadcha. Shalachlo, adayin leishishahu payom. I still have time in the day. Mincha shalachlo, and the afternoon he sent him. Shagali omayim amot. Give me water or money. Sheishli biyadcha. Shalachlo, adayin leishishahu. It's only mincha time. I still have time. Bayom, I still have time in the day. Legally go also adon. So that wealthy person, mocked him. Amar kolashana kulolo yardu geshamim. You had a year, so that's interesting. You had a year to pay back. Or no, maybe you didn't have a year to pay it back, but it hasn't rained for a year. As was pointed out, it doesn't any naturally rain over the summer. Here, everybody is coming up in Sukkot time. We just had situations in which it doesn't rain in Sukkot time, and you're already at Pesach time. And that was the story of Choni HaMe'agel. That was Pesach time, so it's been about a year since the last rains. So for a whole year, it hasn't rained. The Ashav yardu geshamim. Now you think on this very last minute of the last day that you have to pay me back, it's going to rain? He went into the bathhouse in joy, and of course, as the Maharsha points out, he was even further mocking him. He's here going to use the water, to bathe himself, when everybody else is needs water, presumably for even more basic human needs. So, while the wealthy person was going in joy into the bathhouse, Nakdimon went into the Beit HaMikdash. When he was in sad and anguished. He wrapped himself, presumably in his talis, and he stood in tefillah, in prayer, and he said to God, Master of the universe, I did not do it for my honor, not for the honor of my family's house. I did all of this for your honor. Right? I wasn't doing a business deal. I wasn't doing anything to get any credit. I was just trying to help out the tzibur. I was trying to get water for those that are coming up for the regel. Immediately the heavens were darkened with clouds and rain came down. Until the 12 springs, wells of water filled up back with water. And then there was even more water. So now we go back. So the master is now walking out of his bathhouse, sees it's raining. Nakdimon ben Gurion yatsa mi Beit Hamikdash, and Nakdimon ben Gurion is coming out from the Beit Hamikdash. Kishapagu ze bazeh, when they encountered one another, Amarlo, Tainli Dmei Mayim, Yoter Sheishi Biyadcha. So Nakdimon said, "Hey, I'm returning the wells to you. The wells filled up with water while they were still under my, they were still rented to me. They were still borrowed to me. So all the water that they filled up with is now mine. So not only am I paying you back what I owe you, but give me that leftover water." Amar lo, so he said back to him, I know that God, so presumably he was Jewish, right? Because he doesn't say your God, but I know that God did not, cause the world to be tremble except for your sake. Bring about all this change in nature that all of a sudden it rained, and it rained with such force. All of this was for you. I still have a taina, well, not like also like a challenge. That I will be able to get my money back, my money from you, those 12 talents of silver. The sun already set, and it rained into my wells, not into your wells. The rain came after the sunset, so it's my rain. So, B'shuti yardu. Chazar v'nichnas l'beit hamikdash. He went back into the temple. Nitatei v'amad b'tfilah. He wrapped himself in prayer. V'amar l'fanav, and said to God, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Hodash yesh lecha ahuvim be'olamecha. Know that you have those that are beloved in your world. Miyad nitparzru avim. So what happened? The clouds separated, scattered. V'zarcha hachama. And the sun shone forth. So he was able to see that although it was very, very dark because of all the rain clouds, it was still day. So at that moment, the wealthy person said to him, if the sun had not pierced through the clouds, I would have had a challenge against you. That I could have taken my money for you, but now you actually succeed. So very powerful story, or very, but the question also is like, is there like a bigger message here? And I do think it's interesting. Number one, as I said, there is a little biblical echoes of, of like Lohaya Mayim Lishtot, and also it was Shtei Misrei Ma'ayanot, right? Is what Bnei Israel get when they leave, when they leave Israel, which makes it harder to understand, because if they were wells, it would have worked better. But the Ma'ayanot evokes the 12 Ma'ayanot Mayim that they find when they leave Mitzrayim. So there are some interesting biblical echoes. I'm sure something could be said about that. To me, though, there's also an interesting to hold this side by side to the Choni HaMe'agel story. If it's been a year since there's been rain, then it's probably Pesach time, not Sukkot time, and opposed to Choni, where it is, it's about like his almost, his self-assuredness, if not his arrogance, and his own ability to sort of get God to do what he wants God to do, and just says, yeah, go ahead, take in the Tanarei Psachim. He's so self-confident. Right here, you have a person that's more a little, sort of the non-charismatic approach to this, or an approach that works better within sort of the rabbinic, a type of a establishment approach, as opposed to Choni, who could be, a threat to the rabbinic establishment because of his, supernatural powers, as it were. So here's a person trying to do it, in a very pragmatic way, and take a type of responsibility that's presumably available to all. What does it mean to go ahead, get and make a business deal, spend some money, try to do the practical things that are necessary. And in the end of the story, what happens? He doesn't order God around. He doesn't draw a little circle. He also, by the way, goes into the Beit Hamikdash. He doesn't go into his circle, right? So the fact that Choni is going into his circle at a time when there is a Beit Hamikdash, which seems sort of, clear from the context of that story. We know Choni lived in that time. Again, sort of emphasizes his, that he's operating outside of the normal establishment, outside of the normal centers of, of Kiddushan, of God's presence, and so on. It's all about, his unique relationship to God. Here he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. He doesn't make any demands, right? He just prays, God, please help us. And here God, of course, responds in the very appropriate way. He didn't have to go through all of the harsh rains and the light rains, and and that type of a back and forth. God is much more immediately responsive here, right? And to the point that even, this other miracle that follows up. And Yesho Ohavim, you have those that, love you, meaning, again, it's much more all-encompassing. Choni, it's you, Choni, are ben bayit. Here, it's like God, there are people out in this world trying to do the right thing, help us out. So even while he was the one that sort of did it, his approach and his to God is much more not about him personally. Yesho oavim mecha. So I think in my mind, this is a really, there's an important contrast to the Choni HaMe'agel story. All right, you had a question before?
Yeah, this in secular law there is very extensive, detailed laws on water rights. This would imply that there might be some sort of way that you can buy and sell water halakhically.
Right.
Is there such a thing?
Sure. Water is like any other object. And if it's your well, it's your water. And if it rains in your well, then you're konit because of kinyan chatzer. So, yeah, it's treated as, as any other commodity. So, but yes. By the way, I did, misread the word. It's not ohavim, it's ahuvim. Not those that love you, but those that you love. Yesh lecha ahuvim. But again, even though it's ahuvim, it's in the plural. It's not choni who is a ben bayis. You, choni, are the only one special person in the world. There are those that you love, and there's those that you care for. So again, and by the way, here was a person that was Moser himself for the tzibur. He was proactive, right? And he was acting on behalf. Choni waited for everybody to come to him. Right? And so they had to come to him. He wasn't doing anything proactively. He didn't demonstrate any profound, proactive concern for the tzibur. So there's a lot of important contrasts here. Yes, David?
So what's the theological statement here? I think the story is really clear. It's probably a cistern, not a well.
Right.
that what he's doing is he's saying, I want to lease these wells from you and I'll return them full.
Right.
The time comes to give them back and it hasn't rained, so the cisterns are empty.
Right.
And he goes and he says, God, I didn't put up a big sign that said that has my name on it, saying that I'm sponsoring this water station.
Right, exactly.
I didn't do it to remember the yard site of my father. I just God didn't know.
Right. So what's your question?
And then God responds.
Oh, your question about the need of tefillah. So that's a good question, but I think that's a question that you can sort of ask, the entire Masechet. Like, what's the point of tefillah? God doesn't know what we're doing. God doesn't know our masim. God doesn't know our kavanot.
But you made a very strong argument that it's about relationship, and
right.
Relationship needs restoration.
Right.
And then reflecting upon it, speaking about
right.
it. This is not.
So that's the tefillah of Taanit when there is this this distancing. But how do we understand the daily tefillah, right?
Here it sounds like God's missing the calculation.
I don't think
God
so. I don't know when Moshe says, what will Mitzrayim say, and what will this, and how, and remember the brit of the Avot. God doesn't know those things. Okay, so I know it's a general question about the efficacy of tefillah, so I don't know the answer to that. Okay, but anyway, but you are right. I don't understand the word mayanot, other than that it evokes the biblical mayanot, but I think it only does make sense that it's cisterns. But yes, why does tefillah make a difference is a question that goes all the way back. All right, so now the Gemara says like this. Yes? I'm sorry, you had before?
I'm just thinking, maybe that's the point of the interposition of the rains too early, rains too late, rains to the last minute, the Baal giving it all Erev Shabbos. And the relationship is constantly waxing and waning and needs nurturing and needs attention. And we have to recognize, when we get it late, we still have to make do. And when it comes on time, then it's a little bit better. And maybe that's the point of the interposition between those two stories.
Right, and maybe he was just hoping that, by chance things would work out in his benefit, and now he actually is sort of bringing God more directly into the equation. So even though, David, going back to your point, right, even though he did what he did, he didn't earlier say, God, please help me that this will all work out in time, that it will rain in time. He's not only now first explicitly bringing God, into it.
What's striking to me is the impetus. In all of these stories, nothing happens until somebody cries out to God. Doesn't necessarily mean that God is going to take the initiative and provide things for us, just Batazoy, as my grandmother would have said.
Right.
But when we call out to him, it wasn't until he actually wrapped himself and prayed that God then responded. So I wonder if it's what they're suggesting is there's a connection between the two, between our taking the initiative of calling out to God and then God being responsive.
Right, I think so, and I think that's gets back to what Jonathan was saying, which is I think that look, the Rav Soloveitchik talks about this a lot as well, which is that in terms of the tefillah, part of it is not, is our own acknowledgement that, or our own expression of the idea that how we, of our dependency on God, and that it's God that is, that we need God, God's help in all of these things. And until you say that, it's not like you're just persuading God because you're saying the words. It's actually it's about the relationship as well. You're acknowledging your need for God, which you haven't yet sort of said or acknowledged. So I think you're right that these things are, you need to be constantly in that, in that communication. Did I misphrase what you were saying? It's okay. Yeah.
There may be some parallel to the man in the desert when the person who was more righteous received it more readily.
Right.
Less righteous, less readily in terms of this rain, sometimes more, sometimes less.
Right. All of these are about, yeah. So I would say that the point here of tefillah is, is always that issue about sort of acknowledging God and sort of bringing, and sort of revisiting that relationship.
One thing that's interesting
Yes.
about this story, and I wonder if it actually goes out to the Sefah, is that here it's the patron is stepping outside the natural world and going to the market
Right.
to get water.
Right.
Right. And it wasn't depending upon God, bringing
Right.
water to the pilgrims who were
Right.
coming. Similarly, a cistern is a technological innovation.
Uh-huh.
It takes man out of the natural water cycle,
Uh-huh.
and it's innovative, not dissimilar from the program of Yosef Atzadik
Uh-huh.
in Mitzrayim.
Uh-huh.
And also the earlier comments on the last page about what happens when you get all your provisions in one year. Man has to adapt.
Right.
And I actually think that maybe the only ones that are saying that the rabbis perhaps understood that a cistern and aqueducts and all this type of stuff is going outside of the relationship, and I think it's the one. We're supposed to do that,
Right.
but we're still supposed to be
Bring God in the right, have God as part of that relationship. Right.
It's not going outside, right? It's doing your ishtat.
Exactly. So I think both of those are true, and I get it. For the way I'm reading it is also that's just also a clear contrast to the Choni story, because Choni is working in supernatural ways, and here, this guy Nakdimon is actually acting in more natural ways, more this worldly ways than even the Masechet has been, which always focused on prayer. He says, "What's all with this prayer? Let's actually, let's start trying to address the problem."
But he did his establish, which gives him the right to
Right, exactly. So I think that's all of those are legitimate points, and it's again an important contrast to the Choni story. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, I'm sorry. First, a wide line here. Tana Lo Nakdimon Shemo Ela Boni Shemo. His name wasn't really Nakdimon; it was Boni. V'Lamanikro Shemo Nakdimon Sheniktera Chama Ba'avuro, because the sun pierced through. So Nakdimon, I guess the mem from Chama. Although we'll see another use of the mem in a minute. The sun pierced through for his sake. Tanu Rabbanan, Shlosha Nikdima. So now it's not Nikdira, Koder, to pierce through, but Nikdima preceded Lahem Chama Ba'avuran. The sun sort of stayed back for their sake, did not set in its right time. Moshe v'Yoshua v'Nakdimo ben Gurion. So B'Yishlema Nakdimon ben Gurion Gemara. That's a tradition. That's how we know it. Now all of a sudden the story has changed. Not just was it rain and that, and it was, okay, God intervened, but in a natural way, and the sun shone through the clouds, but actually the sun should have set. And that's why it really shouldn't have been being paid back the date. And God kept the sun, held the sun back from setting so that he would be able to pay back his debt. So now we actually have him as doing something as equally, or God doing something as equally miraculous for him as God did for Yoshua, and we'll still soon see Moshe.
You can understand it the opposite to it, but the same meaning. In other words, it rained on his behalf, right? Did it not rain for him?
Yeah.
Right? So Kedar means to darken.
Oh.
So the sky darkened.
Yeah, but that wasn't the verb used before, right? It says, no, you're right. It says, no, but wait a minute.
Simultaneously mean that it darkened.
So the Adon said, Ilu lo niktera chama haya li pitchon peh. So, but I see your point. Maybe there's a play. Okay, that could be. But here, clearly, it's about the sun not setting. Yoshua nami kroxi. By Yoshua, it's a verse. Vayidom hashemesh v'yareach hamad. Moshe minalad. So Moshe is the only one we don't know had this miracle occur to him. So where do we know this from? So Rabbi Eliezer Asya Echel Ksivacha Echel Teis Pachtecha. God says much. I will begin to put your fear Tachas Kol Hashamayim. Ksiv Hasam, and says by Yoshua Echel Gadcha. I will begin to raise you up. Rabbi Yosha with same Gzula, that account to Yoshua occurred to Moshe. Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani Amar Asya taste. Ksiv hachachel taste pachtecha by Moshe. I'll begin to place your fear, the fear of you. The Ksiv hasam biyom taste Hashem es ha'emori. So by Yoshua, so Gzeira Shabbat. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asya migufei tekra. It's implicit in the verse. Asher yishmuna shimachav ragzu v'chalu mipanecha. God says to Moshe, they'll hear of your reputation and they'll tremble in fear from your presence. So when would that be? Why are they going to fear Moshe's presence? How do they know about Moshe? It must be the same miracle occurred. I don't know exactly how you get that from the pasuk. Something maybe happened, but exactly that miracle is not clear. But again, here now you do have this amazing thing, right? Because you have this person who's basically what he did was operated in the most this worldly way, right? This Nakdimon, and he's getting the same miracles that Moshe and Yoshua, and the same changing of nature, the most tremendous, change of natural laws. It's not just that it rains, that Moshe and Yoshua got. So it's really, I think, a powerful message about, not that people will have these miracles done for them, but about, this worldly type of leadership that he embraced and the power of that. Okay, now back to the Mishnah. A city that does not have rain, if it rain in some city, in one city and another city, and the whole issue was that the city that didn't have rain, would fast, and the other city would not fast, but then other types of things with the surrounding cities or villages would participate in a lesser way. And it quotes a pasuk, and the pasuk is, Al irachas amtir, Al irachas lo amtir. I'll bring rain on one city, not on the other. So Amar Rav Yudam Arav v'shteim liklala. You would think that the city that gets rain is a bracha, and the city that doesn't get rain is a klal. It's possible they'll both be a curse. Now, this isn't exactly spelled out, but at least anyway, the way some of the commentators say, it means that, if it means that those that don't have will then all go to buy their grain from the other city, it's not exactly clear how that's a curse. That's good for business. So some say it means that no, the city that does have could have too much rain.
No, so it creates a shortage.
What?
It creates a shortage.
Okay, it creates if the demand outstrips the supply.
Yeah, so it's the 1%.
That's a good point. Okay. Oh, you don't get how it could be good and how it could be bad for those that got the rain?
Well,
there'll be more of a shortage if both of them didn't have rain. So how the presence of rain is bad. So anyway, Rashi says that it means that it's just that it will be too much rain. Sometimes too much can also be a klala, even though you don't pray for rov gishamim. Anyway, not so clear. Now we're going to go have a number of statements on Amar Yud Amar Rav doing the reverse, taking verses that look like a curse and saying that they're really a blessing.
Okay. For this course.
Exactly. Excellent point. Mentioning that, we're going to get to Bilam in a minute anyway. So Jerusalem was for a nida, like a menstruate women among them, obviously showing the way that a nida in ancient society would have been treated as an outcast. Larger discussion. That's a blessing. Kinida. The same way a woman who's a nida eventually becomes permissible to her husband, Yerushalayim will be once again in its former state. Nida is not a permanent status. Haisa ke'almana, she was like a widow. Amar Rav Yehuda libracha, there's a blessing in that. Ke'almana, like a widow, not a real widow. A woman whose husband has gone overseas, maybe she hasn't seen him for years, but eventually he'll be coming back. I have placed you that degraded and lowly. Amar Rav Yehuda libracha, there's a blessing in that. V'lo mukmi minan la rashe nahare v'lo gizirifti. That they don't, because the non-Jews think that we're so lowly and despicable, they don't make us tax collectors and they don't make us, soldiers, or some say it means like officers, like police officers that would beat people. We don't get these jobs, which are jobs of status, but also jobs that are morally, deeply problematic. I mean, because the Jews were so despised that they weren't allowed to own land is how they got to be money lenders and how they got to be became a major source of serious of antagonism, but also of wealth. So sometimes there was a hidden blessing in some of that, pushing them to those other professions. God will smite the Jewish people the same way the reed will sway in water. There's a blessing in that. The Amar Rabbi Yishmael bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, what does it mean? Ne'amanim pitzei ohev. Trustworthy are the smites of the one who loves you. V'ne'atarot nishikot zoneh, and burdensome. Question exactly how to translate that word, but burdensome are the kisses of one who hates you. So you'd rather get hit by your friend than kissed by your enemy. So what does that mean? So Tova Klala Shekilel Achya Hashiloni. So this pasuk about the reed swaying in water was from the Navi Achya Hashiloni. So better is that curse that he cursed at Israel. Yoter mi bracha shebirchan Bilam Arasha. There you go. So it's better than the blessing of Bilam. Achya Shaloni Kilalam Achya Shaloni cursed them and Bekanet that they would be like a reed. Amar lem Yisrael. He said to the Jewish people, "Vikashem et Yisrael kasher yonu rakaneh makaneh ze omei b'makom." So let's think about it. The reed can stand in a place of stands. Number one, it grows in a place of water. Right, it's there in the middle of the water. V'gizo machalif, and it constantly is like replenishing its stalk. V'sharashav merubim, and has very many and deep roots. No matter how strong the winds are, they don't move it from its place, right? It's very flexible and its roots are deep. It sways with the wind. And when the winds stop, it's still where it always was. So the ability to sort of, on the one hand, be deeply rooted, and on the other hand, be able to deal with all of the terrible things that pass over, and that, there's a blessing in that. The wicked Bilam blessed them with a cedar. Shene'emar, as the verse says, ka'arazim alemayim, like cedars by the water. They take out that part of alemayim in a minute. You'll see why. Because cedars normally, although the verse says alemayim, but nevertheless, cedars normally do not stand in a place of where there's a plentiful water. The ein gizo machalif, and its trunk does not replenish. The ein sharshav merubim, and does not have very deep roots. While it's true that normal winds cannot move it from its place. Once a strong southern wind comes, that can uproot it from its place. So therefore, the idea that you're a lowly reed, there's a blessing in that. It means that you're not, that you're able to sway with the winds, and you stay rooted, and you'll always be, replenished. And this lowly reed also not only is able to survive, but also serves because it's so lowly, gets used in very profound religious purposes. Through it, you write the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. So Yisrael, they're of a lowly status in this worldly sense, but they're a vehicle of Kiddusha. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, so using the same imagery we just used, a person should always be as soft, as flexible, as bending as a reed, and not as hard, not as unbending as a cedar. Maaseh Shabbat Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer, some of the years are Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Migdal Gedor, very famous story. So Rabbi Eliezer was coming from Migdal Gedor. Now it's interesting just to note what those two words mean, right? Migdal is a castle, a tower, and Gedor is like a fenced-in castle. So he was coming from his academy, from his castle in the sky. Okay, he was coming from having learned Torah in this very hermetically sealed environment. Mimigdal Gedor, mi beis Rabbo, from his master's house. V'hayag rachov al chamor u'metayel asrat hanahar. He was riding, I guess Rachuv or Rochev al-Chamor. He was riding on the donkey, and he was slowly going by traveling, not traveling. What's the word for Matayel? Yeah. Anyway, he wasn't in any rush. He was just strolling by. Oh, I don't know if you can stroll on a donkey.
He was in the shade. Around from not being in the sun.
Maybe. Okay, anyway, he was strolling on his donkey there by the riverside. And he was feeling very self-satisfied. He was feeling very happy with himself. He was feeling, very proud, how great he was. He had learned all this Torah because he learned a lot of Torah. Okay, so that's the setup. I do want to say something about riding on a donkey, and maybe I'm reading a little bit into it, but who else rides on a donkey? Mashiach, right? So maybe he had a little bit of a messianic complex. He was thinking he was God's gift. He was thinking, oh my God, look how wonderful I am. Here he is. Okay, what?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
You have the little Jesus thing.
Right, okay.
Sorry, certain other religions.
Okay, he's Dameilo Adam Echad. A certain man chanced upon him. According to some versions, this is Eliyahu Hanavi who's coming to teach him a lesson. Okay, it's not explicit in the story. And he was very ugly, very unseemly. Amarlo. And this man treated this rabbi with respect. Shalom alecha, Rabbi. Peace to you, my master. He did not respond to him. He didn't say, Shalom alecha. He was so beneath his, the worth. He was so, he wasn't even worthy of a response. Amarlo, he said, but now he did say to him, he didn't respond to him. To respond to him would have made him somehow socially equal. So he refused to respond, but now he has something to say to him. Okay, to say down to him. Amarlo, and he said to him, Reika, you empty person, kama mechuar oto ha'ish, how disgusting you are, how ugly you are. So, Shema koblet yircha mechuarim kamotcha, or maybe all the people in your city are as disgusting as you are. So Amarlo, he said back to him, Eini yodeya, I don't know. Ella, how my other people in my city. Ella, but if you've got a problem, lech ve'amor le'uman she'asa'ani, go back and tell the craftsman who made me, kama mechur klizeh she'asita, how disgusting is this vessel that you have made. So I do want to say something else about this, which is also that, right? Presumably the message here is that the real person who was ugly, right, was the rabbi, right? The sort of the ugliness inside as opposed to the ugliness on the outside. But it's interesting that he calls him Reika, empty person, because Reik means what's on your inside, right? And that's sort of part of the whole problem here is that he's calling him Reika, but he's looking at the outside, and he's calling him Reika. He's not really caring or seeing what the inside. The other thing is when he responded Eini Yodeya, right? So presumably most people will know what the people of their city look like, right? But he actually is sort of saying, taking a humble response. I don't know. There are a lot, I don't think I know everything. Okay, but here's the one thing I do know. This isn't how you talk to people, and this isn't a proper way of religious acting. But as opposed to you think you know everything. You came back from yeshiva. Sometimes you have this anyway. Kids come back from Israel all of a sudden, they know everything now. Okay, you think you know everything. You know what's inside of me. You know how to assess me. You know how to value me.
But Rabbi, I knew everything when I was 19.
Exactly. So and so he's also sort of modeling a response of Eini Yodeya. Okay, so I don't know, but here's the one thing I do know. Okay, so what? As soon as he realized that he had sinned, Yarad mina chamor, he came down off the donkey. So he came off of his high, elevated status, coming down to earth, right? And prostrated himself in front of him. Amarlo nisi lecha. I have now, it's an interesting verb because, again, we have the word lo na'anu, they were not responded, but does this also mean that I am subjugated to you, or I am hearing you and I'm responding? How do they translate nisi lecha there in English?
I have spoken out of turn to you.
And nisi lecha, I've spoken out of turn? I don't get, how do they translate it in there in Steinsaltz?
I sinned against you.
What? I sinned against you. What do they say before the word I sinned? No, you're finding it? Okay. Anyway, obviously it means something along those lines. What?
There's a parallel to Bilam when he gets off his donkey and he says to the...
And he has a fight with a donkey.
No, when he can't, when he sees the angel.
Right.
He realizes what's in front of him.
Right.
He gets down
Oh, that's a nice point. The getting off of the donkey and the sort of realizing what you haven't seen and what you've done wrong. Nice point. Okay. So anyway, somehow I sinned before you. Oh no, you're right, Charlie. It's just translating nanisi sincerely. That's what that means in context. I don't exactly get what the root of that verb is. Anyway, I have sinned to you, or I've spoken out of turn, from the word like oneh, I guess. But anyway, I've spoken out of turn. Mecholi, forgive me. Amar lo, and he said to him, Eni mochel lecha. I will not forgive you until you go back to the craftsman that made me, the emelo, and say to him, how disgusting is this vessel that you have made? Now, probably what he's saying is that you have not really fully owned what it is that you have done. You don't just get a quick, easy forgiveness, right? There's no tshuva here. I mean, it's just, oh my God, I did something wrong. Please forgive me. Where is any sense of doing tshuva? Where's any sense of owning, how offensive this was, not just to me, but to God. So he was following after him until he came to his city, meaning presumably it means the city, the rabbi city, as we will see. So the rabbi was following after him until they came to the rabbi city. The people of the city came out to greet him. Shalom alecha, Rebbe, Rebbe, Mori, Mori. Peace be to you, Rebbe, Rebbe, our master, our master. So Amar lahem. So this person, this man who was insulted, said to them, Rebbe, Rebbe. Who's this person you say? Rebbe, Rebbe. The person traveling behind you. Now, by the way, this also gives us a little insight why he did not, when he was on his donkey, did not respond to him. Right? Can you see now why he wouldn't respond to him when he was greeted? What did the guy say to him? He said, Shalom alecha, Rebbe. How's this guy used to being greeted? Shalom alecha, Rebbe, Rebbe, Mori, Mori. This guy, he's such a disgusting looking guy, and he doesn't even know how to address me with all the honor that I deserve, right? So we get a little bit more of an insight of why he refused to, and he saw that as a bad reflection on the person. Oh my God, he only calls me Rebbe, right? And obviously what it really is reflecting on is himself. Okay. So who are you calling this person? Rebbe, Rebbe, it's the guy behind you. Amar lahem, he said to them, Im zeh Rebbe? If this is as a teacher, al yarbu kamotcha b'Yisrael. Again, a play on Rebbe and yarbu, right? So if this is a teacher, there should not be many of him in Israel. Amrulo mipnei ma amar lahem kach. Excuse me. Why? Right? They said to him, why? Amar lahem, he said back to them, kach v'kachasali. Look what he did to me. He said, he called me a kli mechuar, how he treated me. Amrulo, they said to him, nevertheless, we're not coming to make any excuses. You should nevertheless forgive him. Adam gadol b'Torahu. He is a great person in Torah. I think even there, the idea is, right, he is gadol, right? And he says, and there's still this sense of his feeling, meaning it could just be read as a pshat. He's a big Talmid Chacham, and nevertheless, but I could also think again that it's all getting to the heart of the problem, right? That he has all of his, his status and his sense of how great he is tied in, is due to his Torah. Not so, so in the very defense of him, it's also reflecting, he didn't say he's great, he's a tzaddik, he's good b'ma'asim tovim. It's all about his Torah and how gadol he is b'Torah. Amar lahem, he said to them, b'shvochem hareini mochelo. For you, not for him. He hasn't done the right tshuva he needs. He's still a problem. For you, I'll forgive him. As long as he doesn't accustom himself to doing this. Now that is a very bizarre response. He should say, right? He shouldn't do this at all in the future. What's lo yehi ragil lasot kain? He shouldn't accustom himself to doing it. So you could say he was being just very realistic. Somebody like this is not going to have a real personality change, right? So maybe the best you can do is try to control this attitude and not completely eradicate it. The Maharsha says it means don't practice in a way, don't be mitragel yourself, don't do the types of actions that encourage this type of a attitude. So maybe if you're going to learn, don't lock yourself off from real people and go riding around on a donkey rather than being down on the earth and and interacting with with normal people, So or other types of things that make you feel how high, how lofty you are because of the Torah. Don't be miragel yourself, don't do types of practices that encourage encouraged this arrogant way of looking at the world. Miyad nichnas Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon. So immediately this Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon went in, the darash, presumably to the synagogue, and expounded. A person should always be as soft, as pliable as a reed, and not as harsh as a cedar. That's why the reed was taken a quill to write the Sefer Torah, Tfilinu Mezuzot. Now, how is that related? Who is he talking to?
The bad guy is the ugly man now in this part.
So is he saying, look, this guy didn't forgive me? I said, please forgive me. I traveled after him, and he was being kasha ke'erez. That would really show somebody who had not at all learned his lesson. I think that is a subtext. I think that at the surface level, what we're supposed to have him understand is that I need to stop being as haughty as an Erez, and I need to learn a little bit of humility. And B, notice also that the Adam Mechuar referred to himself as Klizeh, this vessel. A vessel, so he is an ugly vessel, but he isn't a vessel created by God. And if God is created a vessel, God doesn't mean that he's just created by God. You use a vessel, right? So here you have something that looks maybe ugly, but ultimately it can be the most profound and sublime vessel. And that's what the kaneh is, right? It's lowly. I mean, maybe it's not ugly, but it's lowly, and it becomes the vessel for writing, tefillin and mezuzot. So maybe there is, the acknowledgement. I think there are three possible meanings of this rasha. Number one is I shouldn't have been as haughty. The other thing, which is the parallel, is even a lowly, ugly vessel, can be a tremendous vessel of kiddusha. But I agree with Dov's point that I also think that he might still, be critiquing this man even at the very end, and still might be saying, and you should have been more responsive than you actually were.
But he was playing, because his original intent was not to forgive, and then he
forgave at the end. So there was some right. That's true. He was pliant at that stage, not because of the rabbi, but because of the people. But that's right. Yes.
Even more fun.
Right.
Regarding an error being negative, what about Zadik Takama and his product?
Yeah, so that's a problem. Obviously, there are positive images with trees and so on, but we're using this to make this point. Okay, yes.
Whichever of the two it may be, although I'd be more inclined to the first one.
Yeah.
What gets lost in it is how fundamentally problematic it seems to me is the response of the people to him. And they told him, you forgive him anyway because he's a big
Talmud Chacham. Right. No, that's the problem. The problem is that he gets a pass. That's exactly. That's the whole problem, is that people give him a pass for this behavior because he's a Talmud Chacham, and in a way that serves as a terrible model for what. Right. I think
they seem to be sanctioned.
Right. I think that's a very good point. You're right. I don't have an answer to that. You're absolutely right. Yeah. All right. Let's just try to begin one more section. Now we get to the types of things that you fast in nearby towns, or you pray in nearby towns. It's not the same severity because they're somehow connected. And the two things that are mentioned in the Mishnah are dever, this pestilence. Oh no, I'm sorry. We're not yet to the nearby town thing, are we? Oh, yes, we are. Okay, so it's pestilence and the falling buildings. So we will see, as some of you already sort of figured out in the Mishnah, that the falling buildings are not that the buildings aren't constructed well, but is that there's earthquakes, or that there's very terrible winds and things that could affect the neighboring towns as well. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Mapolet Amru Briot V'lo Ru'uot. It's only if healthy buildings, strong buildings fall down, not if weak buildings fall down. That doesn't prove anything. It's a weak building. She'einam Ru'uot Lipo V'lo Ru'uot Lipo. Buildings that were not normally fit to fall down and that were constructed in a way that they should have stood for a very long time. But we're not talking ones that were about to fall down. That were not that. Okay. So the Gemara says those are the same things. Why do you need two definitions? Healthy buildings or buildings that are not fit to fall down. Shaky buildings. It's the same way as saying buildings that are fit to fall down. So what's the purpose of saying these two descriptors? So the says, you can have something that is constructurally sound or made of sound materials. It's not rotting away, but it is way too tall for its. I guess it so that it's ru'yot lipol, even though it's not ru'ot, right? So it's not dilapidated, right? It's not a crumbling building. It's made of good, strong, new building materials, but the way it's constructed is it still could fall down. Or let's say it's built right at the edge of a river, right? So it could be very strong materials, but if the river overflows or eats away at the ground underneath, it could collapse. So there's other reasons it could be fit to fall, in addition to it being, dilapidated and crumbling. There was a literally like a trembling wall, a wall that was in bad shape. The Havi ben Arda that was in Narda, that Rabbi Shmuel would not walk under it. Even though that it was there for 13 years, they still said it's constructed in a way that could fall anytime. There's always going to be that one moment in time when it actually falls, and they did not take the fact that it had survived for 13 years to say that we don't have to worry about it. Now, presumably, again, the Ri'u'ah here is not, it's funny because it's trying to bring a proof for something that could be well constructed and still maybe about to fall. That was something that is not Ri'u'ah. Here the wall is being defined as Ri'u'ah. But nevertheless, the message seems to be that even if something looks like it's been standing a long time, it doesn't look dilapidated, it might be constructed in a way that it could fall at any moment. One day Rav Ada bar Ahava visited that place. Amalei Shmuel Rav, and then they were taking a walk with him, and they came to this wall. So Shmuel said to Rav, Nesi Mar Nakif, let's go walk around the wall like we always do. No, today we don't have to walk around the wall. Why? Rav Ada bar Ahava is with us, and he is such a meritorious, he's such a tzaddik, a virtuous man, that Denafish Zuchu say that his merits are enormous, are v'lo mistafina. I'm not afraid that the wall will fall down. His merits will protect us. So Rav Huna havleyahu chamra. Rav Huna had some wine, ba'hu beis ra'aya, in a house that was dilapidated. And he said he was afraid to go into the cellar to get the wine. The whole house could collapse on him on any moment. And he wanted to get his wine out of there. So what did he do? He took Rav Ada bar Ahava there. And he got in a conversation with Rav Ada bar Ahava. He started talking to him in Torah. They started on a walk. He said, "Oh, look, here's this house. I got some wine." And they continued walking into the house and talking in Torah. Until he got his wine out of the house, and he was all along keeping Rav Ada bar Ahava there, talking in Torah. But Boster did nothing, and then the moment they left the house, Nafal Beisa, the house fell down. So Yirgish Rav Ada bar Ahava, so Rav Ada bar Ahava had a sense of how he was being used. It's funny, until that point he didn't have a sense. He is so caught up in his Torah, as we're going to see, Rav Ada bar Ahava is like completely immersed in Torah, that he wasn't even aware about which house are we in, what's going on here. He was just talking in Torah. When the house actually collapsed, he got a sense about something was up. Okay, so Yirgish, he had a sense that something was up. Ikbid, he got a little bit upset. Savarullah, he said, Ki hadam Rav Yanai, olam al yamod adam b'makam sakanav yomer osin lo neis, shemei nosim lo neis. He says the person should never go in a place of danger and say a miracle will be done, because maybe even somebody who's deserving, the miracle won't be done. V'im tim so lo merosim lo neis, and if the miracle is done, minakim lo mizchuyotav, it counts against your merits. Amar Rav Chanan Mikra, where you see it, the verse says, Kantoti mikol hachasadim mikol hamet. So it literally means I'm undeserving of God's kindness, but it here is being saying I have been made small because of God's kindness. Now that has shrunk my account of merits. So my wife has this mentality, or whatever, she was brought up with this mentality. So whenever we get some thing like we find a parking space exactly where we need to in Manhattan or something like that, she said, he's using up some olam haba right there. So anyway, but here you have this person who's protecting them with his tremendous merits. Again, interesting to think how this might be a different image than the Choni HaMe'agel image. Here he's completely even unaware of his powers and what's doing, and other people are sort of, using him in this way. And here it's all about Torah, as we will see. So we will continue with this tomorrow. Let's just end by saying a Kalmale for the teens.